everybody, it's Susan from the Newnan Carnegie Library. I'm here today with another book review for you. Today we're going to be talking about a nonfiction book, Elizabeth the Queen, The Life of a Modern Monarch by Sally Bledell Smith. And this is a great book for anyone who enjoys not just nonfiction books, but books about history, historical figures, or if you're even just interested in the Great British royal family, which I definitely am. I remember, when I was younger going to the library and just getting books about Princess Diana. I really loved reading about Princess Diana. So I really enjoyed this book. It's got a nice little bit of heft to it. So it's packed full of, facts and everything, because Queen Elizabeth has had a very interesting and long life, and there's a lot that's happened. So it begins at the beginning of her childhood, and it kind of traces her life. And something that I found really interesting about the book was just reading how, when she was growing up, she did not know she was going to be queen yet, because she was not like second in line to the throne. She had an uncle who was first in line to the throne, so she was like third in line to the throne. But if he had had kids, she would have been just really far back. So it's interesting how she was raised, as she was still in the royal family, but she wasn't quite in line to be queen until her uncle decided to abdicate the throne. So she was kind of thrown into it all of a sudden, where they're like, well, you're going to be the next queen, so it's time to start getting ready. And it was kind of like, oh, her childhood was over, because her whole life just changed in an instant. So I found that interesting at the beginning. And then it traces through everything from when her own father died rather young and she became the young queen, to her marriage, to all of her children, as well as the things that were going on with the prime ministers. And I found this really interesting. I read this book about 6 months before The Crown came out. So when The Crown on Netflix came out, it was really interesting, because I'm like, oh, I remember that from this book. And I remember, this is true. My husband and I were watching it, and I was like, that's true. No, I think that they're taking creative license with that. So it was interesting. It really helped me be able to really interpret that program as well. And if you haven't watched The Crown, I suggest you do watch it, because it is a really, really amazing TV show. It's on Netflix, so definitely check that out as well. But this book, a lot of times when you read biographies for someone who's had such a storied life and has had so much happen to them, but they're also like in a position where there's a lot of government and politics and things like that, it can read as a little dry, but I found this one to be fascinating. It was a book that's like based on facts. They interviewed so many people. She got some amazing interviews, so that we got firsthand accounts from a lot of people who are close to her. But it's not one of those books that you read and you're like, oh, this is a little more gossipy than I like, and kind of so-and-so said this, so-and-so said this, more gossip. It's like really based on facts. So that's why I really enjoyed it. But it was not dry or boring. It was really interesting. And let's see, how many pages is this one? Oh, that's the index. So it's like, yeah, it's over 500 pages, and the print's very small. So it did take me a little bit to read, but I found it to be really fascinating. I did have to check it out a couple of different times before I could finish reading it. But it's really great, and they have amazing photos in there. Like, there's some nice end papers here, and then once you go in the book, at the beginning of every chapter, there's usually a photo, so you can kind of see what people were looking like when they're talking about it in the book, which I always really enjoy, especially from a nonfiction book. And this book goes up to about the time William and Kate got married. So it's not a brand new book or anything, but I found it really fascinating. I learned so much about the life of Queen Elizabeth, and I think, it's just interesting to read her story, and you just wonder what she thinks about when she's alone, because she's gone through so much in her lifetime. And I just found it really interesting. So I highly suggest this book, and also to check out The Crown, because that's an excellent TV show as well. So I hope you enjoyed this review, and we'll see you soon.